They called me the nanny at my own daughter's birthday party. My mother-in-law stood at the head of the table, raised her champagne glass, and said, "We'd like to thank the help for setting up today." Then she looked directly at me and smiled. My daughter Lily was turning 5. I had spent 3 days baking her cake, hand-cutting every single star from gold foil paper and stringing them across the backyard myself. And in 30 seconds, Patricia Caldwell turned me into the hired staff in front of 40 of their country club friends. I smiled back. I said nothing. I went to the kitchen, and I cried quietly into a dish towel for exactly 4 minutes. Then I washed my face, walked back out, and sang, "Happy birthday" to my daughter, louder than anyone else in that yard. That was 2 years ago. I was 31 years old, married to their son Marcus for 4 years, and I'd already learned one thing about the Caldwell family. They never believed I belonged. What they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that 6 months before that birthday party, I had received a letter from a law firm in Seattle. My great-aunt Ruth, who I had met exactly twice in my life at family reunions when I was a child, had passed away at 83. She had never married, never had children. She had spent 40 years quietly building a medical supply company that she sold in pieces over the last decade of her life. The letter informed me that she had left the remaining assets and a private investment portfolio entirely to me. The total amount after taxes and legal fees came to a little over $9 million. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the elementary school where I taught 2nd grade and I read that letter 4 times. Then I folded it, put it in my glove compartment, and drove home and made dinner like nothing had happened. I didn't tell Marcus. I know how that sounds. But you have to understand who Marcus Caldwell was by that point in our marriage. He was not a bad man in the way people imagine bad men. He didn't raise his voice or break things. What he did was disappear. Every decision, every opinion, every version of himself got handed over to his mother the moment she called. And she called constantly. Patricia had opinions about where we lived. We rented a house 12 minutes from the Caldwell estate. She had opinions about where Lily went to school, a private program that Patricia paid for and therefore controlled. She had opinions about my job, my clothes, my cooking, and once, memorably, the way I loaded the dishwasher. Marcus nodded along to all of it. When I pushed back, he told me I was being sensitive. So when I sat with that letter from the Seattle law firm, I made a calculation. If Patricia found out I had $9 million, she would find a way to take it. Maybe not legally, but she would begin working on Marcus immediately, and Marcus would let her, because Marcus always let her. She would want to invest it in something her brother managed. She would want to buy a bigger house that she would then visit every weekend. She would want control of it the way she wanted control of everything. And by the time she was finished, it wouldn't feel like mine anymore. I called the law firm the next morning from my classroom during lunch. I asked them one question. Could we keep this entirely private? The attorney, a woman named Carol Estrada, said yes. She had handled situations like this before. I told her to proceed quietly. The money went into a trust I set up in my name only. I kept teaching 2nd grade. I kept driving my 2019 Honda CR-V. I kept nodding at Patricia's opinions about my dishwasher loading technique. For 18 months I watched Marcus check his phone every time his mother texted during our daughter's bedtime stories. I watched him cancel our anniversary dinner because his father wanted him at a golf event. I watched him agree when Patricia suggested that maybe Lily's learning difficulties. Lily did not have learning difficulties. Lily was 5, meant she should be evaluated by a specialist Patricia's friend recommended. I watched all of it, and I stayed quiet. And I waited to see if anything would change. Nothing changed. And then something happened that I hadn't planned for. In February of last year, I came home early from a professional development day to find my mother-in-law sitting at my kitchen table with a folder of documents and a man I had never met. Marcus was sitting across from them with a pen in his hand. They heard the door and all 3 of them looked up with the exact expression of people who have been caught doing something. The man, it turned out, was a financial advisor named Gerald, who was Patricia's brother-in-law. The documents were refinancing papers for our house, the house that was in both Marcus's and my name. Patricia had decided that the equity in our home should be better utilized in a real estate investment fund that Gerald managed. She had not discussed this with me. She had apparently discussed it extensively with my husband, who had agreed to sign without telling me. I stood in my kitchen doorway holding my teacher bag and a paper cup of gas station coffee. And I looked at my husband's face and I understood that we had reached the end of something. I didn't yell. I asked Gerald politely to leave. He looked at Patricia, who nodded, and he left. Then I sat down at the table with my husband and my mother-in-law, and I said, very clearly, that I would not be signing anything, that my name was on that house, and that this conversation was over. Patricia told me I was being irrational. Marcus told me his mother was just trying to help. I picked up my teacher bag and I went upstairs, and I sat on the edge of the bed, and I thought about my great-aunt Ruth, who I barely knew, leaving me everything she had built, and I thought about what she might say if she could see the kitchen table I had just walked away from. I filed for divorce 3 weeks later. The Caldwells did not take it quietly. Patricia called my parents, who she had met twice, to tell them I was destroying her son's life. Her attorney sent a letter suggesting that because Marcus had been the primary financial provider during our marriage, he made $68,000 a year as a project manager, I made $54,000 as a teacher, that I should expect a significant adjustment in the settlement. They wanted the house. They wanted primary custody of Lily, on the grounds that my work schedule was unstable. Patricia volunteered to provide childcare, which everyone understood to mean Patricia would be raising my daughter. My attorney, a woman named Dana Park who a teacher friend recommended, read through everything they sent and told me it was aggressive but not unusual. I asked Dana what our position was. She said our position depended heavily on assets and financial stability. I told Dana about the trust. Her expression did not change, which I appreciated. She asked a few careful questions. Then she said we were in a very different position than the Caldwells believed. We said nothing. We let their attorneys perform. Their side submitted financial disclosures showing Marcus's income and our joint assets, the house, one savings account with $11,000, 2 vehicles. Patricia submitted a letter attesting to her son's character and his lifelong commitment to family values. It was 4 pages long. My attorney read it and set it aside without comment. What their side did not know was that under Washington state law, inheritance received by one spouse and kept separately, never commingled with marital assets, is considered separate property. Carol Estrada had been careful. Every dollar of Ruth's trust had stayed in accounts in my name alone. I had never transferred anything into our joint account. I had never used it to pay a household bill. For 18 months it had simply sat there, entirely mine, entirely outside the reach of the Caldwell family and their brother-in-law Gerald and his investment fund. The morning of the settlement conference, I wore a gray blazer I had owned since before my marriage. I drove my CR-V. I got there 8 minutes early and sat in the hallway with a coffee and my phone, and I read emails from my second grader's parents about an upcoming field trip. Patricia arrived with Marcus and both of their attorneys, and she was wearing a cream blazer and pearls. And she looked at me in the hallway the way she had looked at me at Lily's birthday party, like I was something temporary that had overstayed its welcome. Inside the conference room, their lead attorney made an opening offer. The house would go to Marcus. I would receive my vehicle and a monthly support payment of $800. Custody would be split 60-40 in Marcus's favor, with Patricia available as the primary caregiver during Marcus's working hours. Dana let them finish. Then she opened her folder. She presented the trust documentation. She presented Carol Estrada's declaration outlining the inheritance timeline, the account history, and the complete separation from any marital assets. She presented my 18 months of bank statements showing that I had never touched a dollar of it for anything related to our joint household. The room was very quiet for a moment. Then Patricia said, "That's not possible." Dana said it was not only possible but fully documented and legally established. Patricia turned to Marcus and said something in a low voice. Marcus was staring at the bank statements. He had the look of someone recalculating something very large in their head. Their attorney asked for a 30-minute recess. During that 30 minutes, I went to the hallway and ate half a granola bar and texted my mom a single emoji, the small wave hand. She texted back a heart. When we went back in, the offer had changed substantially. I received the house outright. I received primary custody of Lily with Marcus having full and regular access, on a schedule we both agreed to. I received child support and a clean separation of all joint accounts. The custody language about Patricia as caregiver was gone entirely, as though it had never been written. I signed at 3:47 in the afternoon. Marcus signed 2 minutes later. He didn't look at me when he signed, and he didn't look at his mother. Patricia stood up when it was done and said, "You'll regret this." She said it the way people say things when they have nothing left to say. I said, "I hope Lily and I will see you at appropriate times, Patricia. She loves her grandmother." Then I picked up my bag and I left. That night I ordered pizza, and Lily and I built a blanket fort in the living room and watched 3 episodes of her favorite cartoon, and I let her fall asleep on the couch instead of putting her to bed at the right time. And I sat there in the dark with the blue light of the TV on her face, and I let myself feel it all at once. In the months after the settlement, things moved at their own pace. The divorce was finalized in August. I kept teaching. Lily started first grade. Marcus, to his real credit, began showing up differently. He came to every school pickup on his custody days. He planned actual activities for Lily instead of dropping her at his mother's. He started attending a weekly meeting I only found out about because Lily mentioned his quiet group. He was trying, slowly, in the way people try when they have lost something and finally understand what it was. Patricia did not call me. I did not expect her to. What I did, starting in October, was begin having conversations with Carol Estrada and a new advisor Dana connected me with, a woman named Priya who works specifically with first-generation wealth. I told Priya what I cared about. I told her I had spent 7 years teaching second grade and watching which kids arrived having already been left behind, and which families couldn't afford the field trips, or the school supplies, or the tutors that showed up in the parking lot every Thursday for the children who needed more time. I told her I wanted to do something about that. Priya and I spent 2 months building a structure. In January, I established a foundation. We named it the Ruth Estelle Foundation, after my great-aunt, whose last name I had never known until I read the letter from Carol Estrada's firm. The foundation's initial focus was educational equity in under-resourced elementary schools in our district, classroom supply grants, field trip funding, and a specific program for early literacy intervention. I did not make an announcement. I sent letters to the principals of 11 schools and asked if we could schedule meetings. The first person to figure it out was another second-grade teacher at my school, a woman named Bev, who had been teaching for 26 years and who knew everything that happened in that building before the principal did. She stopped me in the copy room one morning in February and said, "Sophie, is that your foundation?" I said yes. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "Girl." And then she hugged me next to the copy machine and we both cried a little bit and she made me promise not to tell anyone she cried. I kept teaching. I did not leave my classroom. People asked me later why I stayed, and the honest answer is that I like my job. I like 7-year-olds. I like the specific quality of a room when 22 children are all quietly reading at the same time, and you can see some of them moving their lips a little. I wasn't keeping my job as a cover story anymore. I was keeping it because it was mine, and I was good at it, and Ruth's money didn't change that. Patricia found out in March when a local education reporter ran a small story about the foundation's first grant cycle. My name was in the 4th paragraph. It was not a big article, but Patricia Caldwell read it because Patricia Caldwell read everything in this town. She called Marcus. He called me, which was unusual enough that I picked up immediately. He said, "My mother just called me." I said I figured. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "How long?" I told him. All of it, the letter, the calculation I had made, the 18 months of watching, the conference room. He didn't say anything for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was different. He said, "I'm sorry, Sophie. I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to hide something from me to keep it safe." That was the most honest thing Marcus had said to me in 4 years of marriage. I told him I appreciated it. I told him Lily was lucky to have him working on himself. Then we talked for a few minutes about her upcoming school concert and whether she needed new shoes, and hung up like the people we were now, which was two parents who had loved each other once and were doing their best with what remained. Patricia did not call me. What she did, apparently, was tell everyone at the club that I had deceived Marcus and hidden assets, and that the whole foundation was a performance. I know this because 3 different people told me, with varying levels of discomfort, over the following 2 months. Each time I said something neutral and changed the subject. I had nothing to prove to the club. The foundation's spring grant cycle funded 17 classrooms across 9 schools. 43 teachers received supply grants. The early literacy program started serving kids in April. A woman named Dr. Yolanda Freeman, who ran the district's reading intervention services and who I had cold emailed in February with absolutely no expectation of a response, became the program's first external partner. At the Foundation's first official board meeting, Dr. Fouchen's first official board meeting, Freeman gave a presentation about early reading outcomes and what changes in 3rd grade when kids have access to the right support in 1st and 2nd grade. There were 7 people in the room. I sat at the end of the table in the same gray blazer I had worn to the settlement conference, drinking bad conference room coffee, and I thought about Lily and her starfoil birthday party, and the dish towel and the 4 minutes I had given myself to cry. My great-aunt Ruth built something for 40 years and then left it to a great-niece she had met twice at family reunions. I don't know what she saw, or if she saw anything. Maybe I was just the last relative she had with no complicated history attached, but I have thought about her a lot in the past year. The 40 years of quiet work, the unmarried life that looked from the outside like it was missing something, and turned out to be entirely, deliberately full. She never needed anyone in that family to see her clearly. She just kept building. My daughter knows that her mother runs a small foundation that helps kids at school. She knows it is named after a great-great-aunt she never met. Last week she asked me if we could visit Ruth's grave someday, and I said yes, and she said she wanted to bring her some of the gold foil stars we had left over from her birthday because she thought Ruth would probably like them. I said I thought she probably would too, and I meant it. People ask me sometimes if I regret staying quiet for so long. 2 years of nodding, 2 years of clearing plates at dinners where I wasn't considered a guest, 2 years of watching my husband look at his phone every time his mother texted, while our daughter was trying to show him a drawing she made. I don't regret a single day of it. Not because silence is always the right answer, but because what I learned in those 2 years was irreplaceable. I learned exactly who everyone was. I learned what my husband would and wouldn't choose when the pressure was on. I learned that Patricia's power over our household was real and practiced, and deeply wired into every decision Marcus made. If I'd acted on anger the first time she humiliated me, or the 5th, I would have walked away with nothing but a justified feeling of righteousness, and Lily would have spent her childhood shuttling between a house I lost and a grandmother who believed she had won. Patience isn't weakness. It's information gathering. Every month I stayed, I understood more clearly what I was actually dealing with and what a real solution would need to look like. The second thing I think about is what I did with what I was given. Ruth left me $9 million, and the easiest thing in the world would have been to let it change who I was, to move somewhere new, buy something expensive, become someone who had escaped and wanted everyone to know it. I had that option. I chose not to take it. I kept teaching because I genuinely believe that the most important thing a person can do with resources, whether that's money or time or knowledge or access, is direct it toward the people who need it most and have the least power to demand it. My 2nd graders didn't have lobbyists. They didn't have foundations named after them. They had me, and then they had a little more. That choice is what I'm most proud of, not the settlement. Not the look on Patricia's face when Dana slid those trust documents across the table. The 17 classrooms, the 43 teachers who got supply grants, the kids who are reading now, who might not have been. The last thing I want to say is about Marcus, because his part of this story matters. He was not a villain. He was a man who had never been required to choose himself over his mother, and so he never developed the muscle for it. When our marriage ended and he finally had to stand on his own, he started building that muscle. Slowly, imperfectly. But genuinely, Lily sees it. I see it. What happens to us when we're never challenged to grow is just as real as what happens when we're challenged too harshly. We stay small in different ways. What I know now, sitting in my classroom on an ordinary Tuesday while 22 kids read quietly and a few of them move their lips a little, is that the life I have is entirely mine. Not inherited. Not performed. Not assembled around someone else's approval. Mine. I built it out of patience and a clear head and a great aunt I barely knew who trusted me with something precious. I intend to keep being worth that trust.